I stood in the doorway of what used to be my sewing room, now converted into my daughter Sandra's home office, watching her type furiously on her laptop while barking orders into her phone. Just 24 hours ago, she'd cornered me in my own kitchen and delivered an ultimatum that still rang in my ears. Now, as I watched her commandeer my home like she owned it, I smiled quietly to myself. She had no idea that by sunrise tomorrow, her perfectly controlled world would crumble completely. The morning Harold died changed everything. We'd been married 45 years, built our life together in this 2-story colonial house in Portland, Oregon. Harold worked his whole life at the paper mill, saved every penny, made sure we'd never want for anything. When his heart gave out that September morning, I lost my best friend, my partner, my everything. But I wasn't prepared for what came after the grief. Sandra showed up at the funeral with mascara running down her cheeks, clutching her 14-year-old twins, Tyler and Madison. "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do," she sobbed into my shoulder. "Brad left us. He cleaned out our accounts. We have nowhere to go." What mother could turn away her only child, Harold, would have opened our door without hesitation. So 6 months ago, I welcomed them with open arms into our 4-bedroom house, the one Harold and I had paid off 10 years ago when he got his promotion to floor supervisor. The first few weeks seemed like a blessing in disguise. The house had felt so empty without Harold's laughter filling the rooms. Tyler helped me figure out Harold's computer, and Madison sat with me in the evenings working on her homework while I knitted. Sandra threw herself into her marketing job working from the dining room table on her laptop. "Mom, could you pick up the kids from school today?" Sandra asked one morning, barely looking up from her screen. "I've got a client call at 3 and you're not working anyway." It seemed reasonable. I was retired, living off Harold's pension and Social Security. What else did I have to do but help my family? Soon picking up the kids became my daily routine. Then came the meal preparations. "The twins are used to home-cooked meals," Sandra mentioned casually one evening, pushing aside the casserole I'd made. "Tyler needs more protein for basketball and Madison's trying to eat healthier. Could you maybe plan better meals?" I started researching recipes, shopping for specific ingredients, preparing separate dishes to meet everyone's preferences. My grocery bills tripled, but Sandra never offered to contribute. When I gently mentioned the expense, she waved me off. "Mom, you own this house free and clear. Harold left you plenty. We're the ones struggling here." The master bedroom situation developed gradually. First, Sandra needed to use my walk-in closet for her work clothes. Then she started taking calls from my bedroom because the lighting was better for video conferences. One day, I came home from the grocery store to find all my belongings moved to the small guest room downstairs. "I need the space for my work-from-home setup," Sandra explained, already arranging her desk where Harold's dresser used to stand. "You understand, right? This job is keeping us afloat." I understood. At least I thought I did. The transformation from mother to unpaid help happened so slowly I barely noticed. Sandra stopped joining us for dinners, taking her plate to her room for working meals. She'd text me grocery lists from upstairs, leave notes about laundry that needed doing, schedule the twins' appointments for times that conflicted with my book club or coffee with friends. "Ruth, you're canceling again," my friend Dorothy asked when I called to skip our monthly lunch. "Honey, when's the last time you did something just for yourself?" I couldn't remember. The financial manipulation started subtly. Sandra happened to see a bank statement I'd left on the kitchen counter, her eyes widening at the balance. Harold's life insurance had paid out $500,000, and between his pension and our savings, I was more than comfortable. "Must be nice," she muttered, then quickly smiled. "I mean, Dad really took care of you." After that, comments about money peppered our conversations. How elderly people didn't need much. How selfish some parents were hoarding wealth while their children struggled. How the house was too big for one person anyway. I was folding laundry in the living room one evening when Tyler's laptop caught my eye. He'd left it open on the coffee table, and the screen showed a legal website. The browser tabs were visible. Elder Financial Abuse Laws, Oregon. How to prove parental incompetence. Power of attorney without consent. My hand stilled on Harold's old flannel shirt, the one I still slept with sometimes. The house suddenly felt cold despite the spring warmth outside. I closed the laptop quietly and finished folding, but my mind raced. That night, lying in the narrow guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. The little girl who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, who made me Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts, who cried on my shoulder when Brad first asked for the divorce. When had I become not her mother but an obstacle to overcome? The next morning, Sandra cornered me in the kitchen while the twins ate breakfast. "Mom, we need to talk about contributions," she said, voice artificially sweet. "I've been buying all the groceries, paying for the kids' expenses. Maybe it's time you helped out more financially." I set down my coffee cup carefully, Harold's favorite mug with the chipped handle. "Sandra, I pay all the utilities, the property taxes, the maintenance. I buy the food, cook the meals, clean the house." Her face hardened. "That's just basic stuff, Mom. Family helps family. Unless you'd rather we found somewhere else to live, I'm sure Tyler and Madison would love being homeless because their grandmother was too cheap to help out." Tyler looked up from his cereal, confusion clear on his face. Madison kept her eyes down, pushing eggs around her plate. They didn't deserve this manipulation any more than I did. "Of course not," I said quietly. "What did you have in mind?" Sandra's smile returned sharp as glass. "I'll put together a budget, something fair for everyone." As she strutted back upstairs to her commandeered bedroom, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. When had I gotten so small? So quiet, Harold would have shown Sandra the door the first time she disrespected me. But Harold was gone, and I was alone, except for family that saw me as a resource to be mined. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong. The mind games started the very next week. I'd set my reading glasses on the kitchen counter while making breakfast turn around to flip pancakes, and they'd vanish. "Mom, they're right here on the bookshelf," Sandra would say, holding them up with concern creasing her forehead. "You must have put them here and forgotten." But I knew I hadn't been near the bookshelf that morning. My medications became a battleground of confusion. I'd organized them in a weekly pill container for years, never missing a dose of my blood pressure medicine or vitamins. Suddenly, I'd find Tuesday's pills in Friday's slot, or my evening medications mixed with morning ones. "I'm worried about you," Sandra announced at dinner, voice dripping with false sympathy while the twins listened. "I found your pills all mixed up again. What if you accidentally doubled your dose that could be dangerous at your age?" "Grandma's getting confused lately." I heard her tell Madison later, just loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. "We need to keep an extra eye on her." The twins began watching me differently. Tyler started pulling out his phone whenever I entered a room, pretending to scroll through social media, but clearly recording. Madison developed a habit of asking pointed questions. "Grandma, do you remember what you had for breakfast?" She'd query, pencil poised over a notebook. "Oatmeal with blueberries." I'd answer, bewildered by the interrogation. "Are you sure I thought I saw you eating eggs?" But I hadn't eaten eggs in weeks. My cholesterol medication made me careful about that. Sandra scheduled a family meeting on a Sunday afternoon, gathering us all in the living room like it was an intervention. She'd prepared a presentation on her laptop, complete with bullet points about concerning behaviors she'd observed. "Mom's been forgetting things." She began clicking through slides. "Misplacing items, mixing up her medications. I've documented 17 incidents this month alone." 17. I wanted to protest, but the twins were nodding along, and suddenly I wondered if maybe I was forgetting things. Was 67 old enough for dementia? My mother had lived to 92, sharp as a tack until the end, but maybe I wasn't so lucky. "I've made an appointment with Dr. Martinez," Sandra continued. "Just for a checkup. We need to make sure you're okay, Mom." The doctor's visit was scheduled for Thursday morning. Wednesday night, I overheard Sandra on the phone in her room, voice carrying through the thin guest room ceiling. "Yes, Dr. Martinez, she's been very forgetful. Sometimes doesn't recognize us. Found her trying to cook at 3 in the morning last week. I'm really concerned about her safety." I'd never cooked at 3 in the morning in my life. I barely slept past 5:30, a habit from Harold's early shift days, but middle of the night cooking, never. At the appointment, Sandra insisted on coming into the examination room. "For support," she said, clutching my arm like I might wander off. She'd filled out all the intake forms herself, and I glimpsed phrases like cognitive decline and personality changes in her neat handwriting. Dr. Martinez, a kind woman who'd been my physician for 10 years, looked puzzled as Sandra described my supposed symptoms. "Ruth, are you experiencing any of these issues?" she asked me directly. Before I could answer, Sandra interjected. "She doesn't always remember her confusion, doctor. That's part of the problem." The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sandra, I'd like to speak with your mother privately for a few minutes." Sandra's jaw tightened, but she couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. Once she left, Dr. Martinez pulled her rolling stool closer. "Ruth, is everything all right at home?" For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything, but Sandra was my daughter. Family problems stayed in the family. Harold always said that. "I'm fine," I lied, maybe a little forgetful sometimes. The doctor didn't look convinced, but she completed her examination. My blood work was perfect. My cognitive tests showed no impairment. She found nothing wrong except slightly elevated stress levels. On the drive home, Sandra gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. "I can't believe she dismissed my concerns like that. We might need a specialist, someone who understands elder care better." That evening, I was cleaning the kitchen when Tyler's phone buzzed on the counter. He'd left it while grabbing snacks, and I saw the text preview from Sandra. "Did you get video of her putting dishes in wrong cabinet?" My blood chilled. I opened the dishwasher and found plates I'd apparently put where the bowls belonged. Except I distinctly remembered Sandra reorganizing the cabinets last week, saying the old system was inefficient. She'd switched everything around, and now my muscle memory was being used against me. The twins' surveillance intensified. Madison started a grandma journal, documenting everything I did with timestamps. Tyler became my shadow phone, always ready. They reported to Sandra like little spies earning praise and extended screen time for their efforts. "Good job noticing Grandma forgot to turn off the stove." I heard Sandra tell Tyler one night, but I hadn't forgotten. I'd been in the middle of making tea when Sandra called me urgently to help with something upstairs. By the time I returned, Tyler was photographing the forgotten burner. One morning, I found Madison in my room going through my jewelry box. "Just making sure everything's here, Grandma," she said sweetly. "Mom says you might start losing valuable things." I wanted to scream that the only thing I was losing was my mind and not in the way they thought. The breaking point came when I discovered a hidden folder on the kitchen computer. Sandra had left it logged into her account while rushing to a meeting. Curiosity made me click on a folder titled Mom's Competency Evidence. Inside were dozens of files, videos edited to show me looking confused with context removed. A clip of me searching for my glasses edited to loop, making it seem like I'd been wandering aimlessly for minutes instead of seconds. Photos of messes I hadn't made, time-stamped for credibility. Even audio recordings of conversations chopped up to make my responses sound disjointed and confused. The most damning was a draft letter to Dr. Martinez expressing grave concerns about my rapid decline since the appointment. It detailed incidents that had never happened, referenced symptoms I didn't have, and painted a picture of a woman sliding rapidly into dementia. At the bottom was a note, "Send after next appointment. Need official documentation for guardianship petition." Guardianship. My daughter was building a case to have me declared incompetent. I closed the folder with trembling fingers, cleared the browser history, and walked calmly to the guest room. Sitting on the narrow bed Harold would have hated. I finally understood the full scope of Sandra's plan. This wasn't about free housework or even access to my money. She wanted everything: the house, the savings, the life insurance, Harold's pension, and she was willing to destroy her own mother to get it. That night, I lay awake planning. They thought they were dealing with a confused old woman too trusting and weak to fight back, but I was Harold's wife. I'd survived raising a teenager in the 80s, Harold's cancer scare in the 90s, the recession that almost took our house in 2008. I'd buried my husband and kept going. Sandra had no idea who she was really dealing with, but she was about to find out. The ultimatum came on a Thursday evening in May. I was seasoning a pot roast, the kitchen filled with the familiar scent of rosemary and garlic, when Sandra marched in with a manila folder and the expression of someone about to deliver bad news they'd been savoring. "Mom, sit down. We need to have a serious conversation." I dried my hands on Harold's old apron, the one with King of the Grill embroidered on it, and took a seat at the kitchen table. The same table where Harold had proposed 46 years ago, where Sandra had done her homework, where we'd celebrated countless birthdays and holidays. Sandra remained standing power, positioning herself like she'd learned in one of those management seminars she was always attending. "I've been running the numbers, and this arrangement isn't working." "What arrangement?" I asked, though I knew what was coming. "You living here rent-free while we do all the work maintaining this place." She opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets and printed emails. "I've been subsidizing your lifestyle for months. Groceries, utilities, maintenance costs. It's not sustainable." I wanted to laugh at the audacity. I paid every bill in this house, bought every grocery, cooked every meal. But I kept my face neutral the way Harold taught me when dealing with difficult customers at the church rummage sales. "What are you proposing?" I asked calmly. Sandra's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A caregiving contract. Simple and fair. You provide housekeeping, cooking, and childcare services. In exchange, you get to stay in your home." She slid a document across the table. "Professional caregivers charge $25 an hour. Full-time help would cost me $4,000 a month. You're getting free room and board instead. That's more than generous." I picked up the contract, scanning the dense legal language. Terms like service provider and dependent elderly resident jumped out at me. According to this document, I wasn't a homeowner or even a mother. I was an employee who could be terminated at will. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. Sandra's mask slipped slightly. "Then you'll need to find alternative housing. This house is too big for one person anyway. The twins need stability, Mom. You wouldn't really make your grandchildren homeless, would you?" There it was, the emotional manipulation wrapped in false concern. Tyler and Madison weren't even in the room, but she invoked them like weapons. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," Sandra said, magnanimous in her assumed victory. "You have until tomorrow evening. I've arranged for Patricia from work to come by and notarize everything. She's doing it as a favor." That night, I pretended to go to bed early, claiming a headache. But once in my room, I studied every line of that contract under the lamplight. The more I read, the more my stomach churned. Hidden in the subsections were clauses that made my blood run cold, references to my diminished capacity and need for supervised living arrangements, provisions that would allow Sandra to make financial decisions in the event of further cognitive decline, a section about property maintenance that seemed to give her authority over household decisions. But it was the last page that revealed the true scheme. Attached as an addendum was another document printed on similar paper, easy to shuffle in during signing. A quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of the house to Sandra. My hands shook as I photographed each page with my phone. Harold's old flip phone I'd finally replaced just last year. Technology might confuse me sometimes, but I knew enough to document everything. Friday morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Portland spring weather. I made breakfast as usual, scrambled eggs and toast for the twins' yogurt parfait for Sandra. She breezed through the kitchen, all smiles and efficiency. "Patricia's coming at 6 tonight," she reminded me. "Wear something nice. We want everything to look official." After she left for her office and the twins caught their school bus, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called in sick to my volunteer shift at the library and drove downtown to Harold's old friend Robert Jennings' law office. Robert had handled our wills, Harold's pension paperwork, and every legal matter we'd ever faced. His secretary Donna hugged me when I walked in. "Ruth, we've been wondering how you were doing. Robert Ruth's here." Robert emerged from his office, silver-haired and dignified, even at 75. He took one look at my face and ushered me inside, closing the door firmly. "Tell me everything," he said simply. For the next 2 hours, I laid out the whole story. The financial manipulation, the gaslighting, the false medical concerns, and finally the contract with its hidden deed transfer. Robert's expression grew increasingly grim as he reviewed the documents on my phone. Ruth, this is attempted elder abuse. Financial exploitation, fraud. We need to act quickly but carefully. I can't have my daughter arrested, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. She's still my baby, Robert, despite everything. He patted my hand gently. We'll find a way to protect you without destroying her. But Ruth, you need to protect yourself first. Harold would want that. We spent the rest of the afternoon crafting a plan. Robert prepared legitimate documents that looked similar to Sandra's contract, but actually protected my interests. A revocable living trust with me as sole trustee, a healthcare directive confirming my competence, power of attorney documents that only activated if 2 independent doctors declared me incompetent. And this, Robert said, sliding one more paper across his desk, is an eviction notice. 30 days legal and proper. You don't have to use it, but you might need it. I signed where he indicated each signature, feeling like reclaiming a piece of myself. Before I left, Robert installed a recording app on my phone and showed me how to use it. Oregon is a one-party consent state, he explained. You can legally record any conversation you're part of. Document everything from now on. I drove home through increasing rain, my mind churning. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of my reflection. For the first time in months, I didn't see a confused old woman. I saw Ruth Morrison Harold's widow, Sandra's mother, and nobody's fool. That evening, Sandra arrived home with Patricia and another woman she introduced as a witness from the office. They set up at the dining room table like it was a closing on a house sale, which I suppose it was meant to be. Now, Mom, Sandra said in that patronizing tone she'd perfected, I know legal documents can be confusing. Just sign where Patricia indicates, and we'll take care of everything. I fumbled with my reading glasses, dropped the pen twice, and asked to use the restroom, playing up the confused elderly woman role to perfection. When I returned, I suggested innocently, should we have more witnesses for something so important? Sandra hesitated, then brightened. That's actually a good idea. Why don't you invite Tom and Carol from next door? And maybe someone from your church. Within 30 minutes, my living room was full. Tom and Carol Hendricks, my neighbors for 20 years. Dorothy from church, who'd been trying to warn me for months. Even my postman Jeffrey, who I'd flagged down during his evening route. Sandra saw it as more legitimacy for her scheme. I saw it as witnesses to her fraud. As I sat at the table surrounded by people who actually cared about me, I felt Harold's presence strongly. Maybe it was wishful thinking, but I could almost hear his voice. Give 'em hell, Ruthie. Before I sign, I said clearly, making sure my voice carried to everyone in the room, I want everyone to understand what's happening here. Sandra's smile tightened. Of course, Mom, you're signing a simple caregiving agreement. No. I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. I'm being forced to sign papers against my will because my daughter threatened to make me homeless if I don't become her unpaid servant in my own home. The room went silent. Patricia, the notary, looked uncomfortable. Sandra laughed, but it sounded forced. Mom's confused, she said to the room. This is why we need these protections in place. I'm not confused, I continued calmly. I know exactly what you're trying to do, but I'll sign your papers, Sandra, for family peace. What happened next was beautiful in its simplicity. As Patricia pushed the documents toward me, I executed the switch Robert and I had practiced. The papers I signed looked identical to Sandra's, but they were the trust documents protecting all my assets. The eviction notice was tucked beneath, ready to be revealed when the time was right. Each signature felt like drawing a sword. Every initial was a battle cry. When I finished, I pushed the papers back to Patricia with a sad smile. There, I said, it's done. Sandra practically glowed with triumph. She had no idea she'd just notarized her own eviction. That night, I barely slept. Not from worry, but from the electricity of finally taking action. I lay in Harold's flannel shirt staring at the ceiling of the guest room and planned my next moves like a general preparing for war. The next morning Saturday, I rose at 4:30 and began my performance. I made Sandra's coffee wrong using regular instead of oat milk. I burned the twins' toast. I forgot to add Madison's vitamins to her morning routine. Each mistake was calculated, reinforcing Sandra's narrative that I was declining. "It's okay, Mom," Sandra said with false sweetness, dumping the coffee down the sink. "We all have off days." But her eyes glittered with satisfaction. Every error I made was another brick in the wall she was building around me. What Sandra didn't see was what I did after they left for Madison's soccer game. I climbed into the attic, muscles protesting but determination driving me forward, and retrieved the lockbox Harold had installed years ago. Inside were our original house deed insurance papers and something new, a small digital camera Robert had recommended. I spent the afternoon installing tiny cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. Nothing fancy, just simple devices that uploaded to cloud storage. Robert's grandson had shown me how to set them up during a computer literacy session at the senior center that was actually a covert operation. "Make sure you get the dining room table," he'd advised. "That's where most elder abuse documents get signed." The irony wasn't lost on me. Sandra thought she was documenting my decline, but I was documenting her deception. Sunday morning arrived with bright sunshine mocking the storm brewing in my house. I attended early service at church, where Pastor Williams pulled me aside. "Ruth Dorothy mentioned you might need prayers for a family situation." I'd known Pastor Williams for 15 years. He'd officiated Harold's funeral, counseled me through grief, watched Sandra grow from a young mother to whatever she'd become now. "I might need more than prayers soon, Pastor," I admitted. "I might need witnesses to my sanity." His face grew serious. "Whatever you need, Ruth. The congregation is your family, too." That afternoon, while Sandra took the twins shopping with my credit card, I met with a group that would become my secret army. Dorothy arrived first, bringing her daughter Lisa, a social worker who specialized in elder rights. Tom and Carol from next door came with their son, Michael, a Portland police officer who worked in the financial crimes unit. We gathered in my backyard, speaking quietly over coffee and cookies like any normal Sunday afternoon. But this was a war council. "I've seen this before," Lisa said, reviewing the documents on my phone. "Adult children who view aging parents as ATMs. The gaslighting, the documentation of false symptoms. It's textbook." Michael nodded grimly. "The fake deed transfer is attempted fraud. With your evidence, she could face serious charges." "I don't want her arrested," I repeated. "I just want my life back." They understood. Over the next 2 hours, we developed a network. Dorothy would check on me daily using a code system. If I mentioned Harold's roses were blooming, everything was fine. If I said they needed pruning, I needed immediate help. Tom and Carol offered their home as a safe house if needed. Their security system would record any concerning incidents near my property. Michael provided his direct phone number and promised to flag my address in the system for priority response. Lisa gave me the most powerful weapon: knowledge. Document everything, every threat, every incident, every gaslight. Email copies to yourself and a trusted friend. Create a paper trail they can't dispute. As they left, each hugging me tightly, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Harold died. I wasn't alone. The next weeks required Oscar-worthy acting. I played the declining elder perfectly during the day while building my case at night. Sandra grew bolder, bringing home healthcare brochures for assisted living communities and leaving them prominently on the counter. "Just in case, Mom," she'd say, "we want you to have the best care." The facilities she'd circled were all budget places that accepted Medicaid nowhere near the quality my savings could afford. It was clear where she expected my money to go, not to my care, but to her accounts. I responded by making spectacular mistakes. I put salt in the sugar bowl, wore my sweater backwards to lunch, called Tyler by Harold's name. Each incident was carefully chosen to seem genuine while being reversible if questioned. But at night, I was a different woman. I met with Robert to update my will, making sure Sandra couldn't contest it. I opened new bank accounts at different institutions, slowly transferring funds in small amounts that wouldn't trigger Sandra's attention. I digitized decades of family documents, creating an irrefutable timeline of my competence and home ownership. The most painful task was going through family photos, seeing the bright-eyed little girl Sandra had been, her kindergarten graduation where she'd announced she wanted to be just like Mommy, her wedding where Harold had cried during the father-daughter dance, the twins' birth when she'd placed Madison in my arms and said, "Thank you for showing me how to be a mother." Where had that girl gone? When had love become leverage? One evening, I overheard a conversation that shattered any remaining illusions. Sandra was video chatting with someone in her room, voice carrying clearly through the thin floor. "Brad, I'm telling you, it's almost done. Once the house is in my name, we can sell it and split the profit. Portland real estate is insane right now. We're talking $700,000 easy." Brad, her ex-husband, the one who'd supposedly cleaned out their accounts and abandoned them. "What about the kids?" Brad's tinny voice asked through the computer speaker. "They'll adjust. Honestly, they prefer your place anyway. This was always temporary just until we could get the assets transferred." My legs nearly gave out. I gripped the stair railing, processing this new betrayal. The divorce had been a sham. Sandra's desperate situation, the tears at Harold's funeral, the grateful hugs when I took them in. All calculated manipulation. They'd planned this before Harold was even cold in the ground. That night, I called Barbara, my sister in Arizona, who I hadn't spoken to in months. Sandra had been intercepting my mail and screening my calls, but she didn't know about the prepaid phone I'd bought at the grocery store. "Ruthie." Barbara's voice crackled across the miles. "My God, I've been trying to reach you. Sandra keeps saying you're too confused for phone calls." "I need you to know the truth," I said and told her everything. Barbara listened in growing horror. When I finished, her voice was steel. "I'm flying out tomorrow. Don't argue. You're not facing this alone anymore." "Sandra won't let you in the house," I warned. "Let her try to stop me," Barbara said with the fierce protectiveness that had made her a force of nature in our childhood. "I've been wanting to have words with that girl since Harold's funeral, when she was eyeing your jewelry like a pawn shop appraiser." The next phase of my plan required delicate timing. I began forwarding mail to a post office box claiming I enjoyed the daily walk to check it. Sandra, believing I was declining, didn't question why a confused old woman would complicate her life this way. At that box, I received correspondence Sandra never saw. Letters from financial advisors warning about suspicious account access attempts, bank statements showing failed password reset attempts, credit monitoring alerts about someone trying to open cards in my name. Each document went into my evidence file, building a case that would be undeniable when the time came. The final piece fell into place when I discovered Sandra's ultimate weapon. I'd gone into her room to collect laundry, maintaining my servant role, when I noticed papers on her printer. Fresh off the machine was a doctor's letter on official letterhead. It was from a Dr. Stephen Chen, a psychiatrist I'd never met, stating he'd been treating me for moderate dementia for 6 months. The letter detailed symptoms, I didn't have medications I wasn't taking, and recommended immediate placement in a memory care facility. The letterhead looked authentic, but something felt wrong. I photographed everything, then did something Harold would have been proud of. I investigated. A simple Google search revealed no Dr. Stephen Chen practicing psychiatry in Oregon. The address on the letterhead belonged to a vacant office building. The phone number led to a disconnected line. Sandra had created a fake doctor to build her case. I sat on her bed surrounded by the trappings of her deception and felt the last of my maternal hesitation evaporate. This wasn't my daughter anymore. This was a criminal who happened to share my DNA. The war was about to begin in earnest, and I finally understood something crucial. I wasn't fighting to save Sandra from herself. I was fighting to save myself from Sandra. Tomorrow would bring Patricia the notary back for additional signatures. Sandra had no idea what those signatures would actually unleash. I was done being the victim in this story. It was time to become the hero. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of pristine Portland weather that made everything feel possible. Mount Hood gleamed in the distance as I sipped my coffee, watching Sandra bustle around the kitchen with nervous energy. Today was her big day, though she didn't know it was mine, too. Patricia will be here at 5, she reminded me for the third time. Remember, Mom, we need additional signatures for the financial transfers to be legal. I let my hand tremble slightly as I set down my cup. Financial transfers. Just technicalities, Sandra said smoothly. Nothing for you to worry about. Wear that nice blue dress, the one Dad bought you for your anniversary. The irony of her choosing Harold's last gift to me wasn't lost on either of us. She wanted me to look competent enough to sign legally binding documents, but confused enough not to understand them. I spent the morning playing my part to perfection. I called Tyler by the wrong name, twice searched for my purse while wearing it, and asked Sandra 3 times when Patricia was coming. Each symptom was noted in her phone with satisfaction. At noon, Barbara arrived like a force of nature. I watched from the window as Sandra tried to block her at the door, but my 70-year-old sister bulldozed past her with the determination that had made her a successful real estate broker. "Where's my sister?" Barbara demanded loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "Aunt Barbara," I called out, adding a quaver to my voice. "Is that you?" The reunion in the living room was worthy of community theater. I clung to Barbara like a confused old woman while she shot daggers at Sandra over my shoulder. We'd choreographed this performance during late-night phone calls. "Ruth doesn't look confused to me," Barbara announced after a pointed examination. "She looks tired and thin. What exactly have you been feeding her, Sandra?" Aunt Barbara Mom's condition has deteriorated significantly. Sandra began her practice speech. "Bullshit," Barbara said flatly. "I've been talking to Ruth every night on the phone she bought because you've been screening her calls. She's sharp as a tack." Sandra's face went through several expressions before settling on wounded innocence. "I don't know what Mom's been telling you, but her paranoia has been getting worse." "Interesting," Barbara said, "because I've been recording those calls with Ruth's permission. Would you like to hear last night's conversation where she explained contract law to me? Doesn't sound very confused to me." The tension in the room could have been cut with Harold's old pocket knife. Tyler and Madison appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. "Is Grandma okay?" Madison asked, and for a moment I saw genuine concern in her eyes. "Grandma's fine, sweetheart," I said clearly. "Just having a visit with my sister." Sandra ushered the twins away, promising pizza for dinner if they stayed in their rooms. When she returned, her mask had slipped completely. "You need to leave Aunt Barbara. This is my house, and you're upsetting my mother." "Your house," Barbara laughed. "Last I checked, the deed still says Ruth Morrison, though I hear you're working on changing that." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Sandra's face flushed, but before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Patricia had arrived early, eager to finish what she thought was a simple notarization. What followed was a carefully orchestrated dance. Sandra tried to minimize the witnesses, but I insisted on calling everyone who'd been so helpful before. Within minutes, Tom and Carol were back along with Dorothy and 2 more church friends. Even Jeffrey the postman stopped by on his route, curious about the gathering. "Mom gets anxious with too many people," Sandra protested. "Nonsense," Barbara countered. "Ruth loves a party. Don't you, hon?" I beamed at everyone while secretly activating the recording app on my phone. Every word from this point forward would be preserved. Patricia sat up at the dining room table again, laying out documents with professional efficiency. I noticed Sandra had added more papers to the stack, probably hoping to slip in additional asset transfers, while I was confused. "Now, Mrs. Morrison," Patricia began, "these are just follow-up documents to the caregiving agreement you signed last week." "Oh," I said, blinking owlishly. "What exactly did I sign last week? My memory isn't what it used to be." Sandra jumped in quickly. "Just the papers we discussed, Mom, about me helping with your care." "I see," I mused. "And these new papers, what do they say?" Patricia looked uncomfortable at being put on the spot. Well, there are several property transfer documents, some financial power of attorney forms, and healthcare directives. Property transfer. Barbara's voice could have etched glass. What property needs transferring? It's just paperwork, Sandra said tightly. Mom agreed it would be easier if I handled the house matters. I picked up the stack of documents, making a show of squinting at them. These look different from what I signed before. Mom, they're exactly what we discussed. Sandra's patience was fraying. No, I said clearly, dropping the confused act entirely. What I signed last week was a revocable living trust, keeping all my assets under my control. What you're trying to get me to sign now is theft. The room went silent except for the hum of Tom's video recording on his phone. Sandra's face cycled through emotions: shock, rage, calculation, and finally desperation. Mom, you're confused. You don't understand what you signed. I understand perfectly. I stood up, feeling taller than I had in months. I understand you've been gaslighting me, documenting false symptoms, and trying to steal my home. I understand you've been working with Brad to defraud me. Oh yes, I heard your phone call. The divorce was fake, wasn't it? Gasps rippled through the room. Madison appeared in the doorway, Tyler behind her, both looking stricken. Mom, Tyler's voice cracked. You and Dad aren't really divorced. Sandra spun toward her children. Go to your rooms, now. No. Madison said, showing steel I hadn't seen before. We deserve to know the truth. I pulled out my phone, swiping to the recording app. Would you like to hear your mother discussing with your father how they'll split the money from selling my house? Sandra lunged for the phone, but Barbara stepped between us. Touch my sister and I'll have you arrested for assault. What happened next broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. Tyler, my grandson, who'd been recording me for weeks to prove my incompetence, turned his phone toward his mother. I'm live streaming this to Instagram, he announced. All my friends are watching. Hi, everyone. This is my mom trying to steal my grandma's house. Sandra froze, calculating whether grabbing his phone would make things worse. In that moment of hesitation, Madison joined her brother. I'm recording too, she said quietly, for Grandma's protection. The twins choosing me over their mother's scheme was a plot twist Sandra hadn't anticipated. Her face crumbled as she realized her own children had turned witness against her. I want everyone to be very clear about what's happening here. I announced to the room. I am not confused. I am not suffering from dementia. I have documentation from Dr. Martinez confirming my perfect cognitive health. What I am is a mother who discovered her daughter's plot to defraud her. I turned to Patricia, who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Did you know you were participating in elder fraud? Mrs. Morrison, I thought this was legitimate. Sandra said you'd agreed to everything. I agreed to nothing except protecting myself. I pulled out the folder Robert had prepared. Here's what I actually signed last week. A revocable trust. A healthcare directive requiring 2 independent doctors to declare me incompetent. And this. I laid the eviction notice on the table with steady hands. 30 days notice as required by Oregon law. Sandra, you need to find alternative housing. The explosion was immediate. Sandra screamed about ungrateful mothers, threatened lawsuits, claimed I was destroying her children's lives. But her audience had turned against her. Tom was already on the phone with his son, Michael, the police officer. Dorothy had called Lisa, the social worker. Even Patricia was documenting the real story to protect herself from fraud charges. You can't throw out your own grandchildren. Sandra played her last card. I'm not, I said calmly. Tyler and Madison are welcome to stay if they choose. You're the one who needs to leave. And Brad, he's not welcome on this property either. As if summoned by his name, Sandra's phone rang. Brad's face appeared on the screen and Tyler grabbed it before his mother could. Hey, Dad, Tyler said bitterly. Mom's performance didn't work. Grandma knows everything. Oh, and so does Instagram. The call ended abruptly. Sandra sank into a chair, finally understanding the trap had been sprung, but not by her. Barbara pulled out her phone with a satisfied smile. I've been texting with Robert Jennings this whole time. He says to tell you that attempting to obtain property through fraud and elder abuse carries serious jail time in Oregon. But Ruth doesn't want you arrested. She just wants you gone. I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. I'll give you the 30 days to find a place. Take what's yours, nothing more. Try to take anything else, and I'll press charges. What about my job, my life? Sandra's voice had shrunk to a whine. The same job where you've been telling people your mother has dementia. I think Patricia might have something to say to your employer about using company resources for fraud. Patricia nodded grimly. I'll be reporting this to HR tomorrow. The beautiful karma was instant. Sandra's carefully built house of cards collapsed in minutes. The witnesses dispersed after hugging me and promising support. Patricia left with apologies and assurances she'd cooperate with authorities if needed. Only family remained. Barbara, myself, Sandra, and the twins, who stood uncertainly between us. Grandma, Madison said softly, I'm sorry. Mom said you were sick and we were helping by watching you. I know, sweetheart. I opened my arms and both twins rushed into them. You were manipulated too. Over their heads, I met Sandra's eyes. The rage had faded to something worse. Calculation. She was already planning her next move. But so was I. The trap had been sprung, but the war wasn't over. Sandra had 30 days to leave, and I knew she'd use every one of them to salvage what she could from her failed scheme. I'd won this battle, but the hardest part was coming. Living under the same roof as someone who'd tried to destroy you while protecting the innocent grandchildren, caught in between. Harold would have been proud of how I'd fought. Now I had to be strong enough to see it through to the end. I woke at 3:58 a.m. 2 minutes before my alarm. The house was silent except for the familiar creaks that had lulled me to sleep for 25 years. Today was the day I'd disappear, leaving Sandra to face the consequences of her actions alone. My suitcase had been packed for a week, hidden in the basement behind Harold's old golf clubs. I'd moved it to my car the night before, claiming I was donating clothes to Goodwill. Everything important, documents, jewelry, photos of Harold, was already safe in a storage unit Sandra didn't know about. I dressed quietly in comfortable travel clothes, nothing that would attract attention. On my nightstand sat the letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. The final version was brief, but devastating. Moving through my house like a ghost, I paused at the twins' rooms. They'd chosen to stay with me these past 3 days, confused and hurt by their parents' deception. I'd left separate letters for them with Barbara to be given when the time was right. In the kitchen, I placed the manila envelope in the center of the table where Sandra always had her morning coffee. Sandra, important, was written across it in my careful script. Inside were the eviction notice, the restraining order Robert had helped me file, a cease and desist letter, and screenshots of every threatening text, every piece of evidence of her fraud. The final item was a printed screenshot of her text to Brad. Once we get the house, Mom can rot in whatever nursing home Medicaid will pay for. She's had her life. I debated including that one, but Sandra needed to see how her words looked in black and white, how her cruelty appeared when stripped of manipulation and gaslighting. My car started quietly in the pre-dawn darkness. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't look back at the house where I'd raised my daughter, nursed Harold through his final illness, and learned how deep betrayal could cut. Barbara was waiting at the airport hotel, having flown in again after the confrontation. She hugged me fiercely when I knocked on her door. You ready for this, Ruthie? I'd been ready since I found out she was plotting with Brad, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. We'd planned this carefully. I needed to disappear long enough for Sandra to reveal her true colors without my presence as a buffer. Barbara would monitor the situation, staying at a nearby hotel, ready to intervene if the twins needed protection. By 6 a.m., I was settling into my window seat on a flight to Phoenix. Barbara's daughter would pick me up, and I'd stay at their guest house until the 30 days were up. It felt surreal fleeing my own home like a refugee, but sometimes strategic retreat was the strongest move. Sandra's first call came at 7:43 a.m. I watched it ring through to voicemail from 30,000 feet airplane mode, protecting me from her rage. By the time I landed in Phoenix, I had 17 missed calls, 43 texts, and 3 emails that probably violated the terms of the restraining order just in their subject lines. Barbara texted updates throughout the day. She called the police to report you missing. Officer told her about the RO. She's livid. Trying to access your bank accounts. Thank God you moved everything. The twins are at school. She hasn't told them you're gone. The last update sent a chill through me. Sandra was maintaining the illusion, probably hoping to use the twins to manipulate me back. But she underestimated both them and me. That evening, safe in my niece's guest house in Scottsdale, I finally listened to Sandra's voicemails. They were a journey through the stages of grief, if grief were made of entitlement and rage. "Mom, where are you? This isn't funny." "I saw your letter. You can't be serious about this restraining order." "The bank says you've closed your accounts. How am I supposed to buy groceries?" "Tyler and Madison need stability. You're destroying their lives with this stunt." "Fine. You want to play hardball? I'll contest the eviction. That house is half mine anyway. Dad would have wanted me to have it." The last message was different, quieter, more dangerous. "You think you've won, but I know things about you, Mother. Things Dad told me. About the money you hid from him. About why we really moved from California. I'll destroy your reputation if you don't drop this nonsense and come home." I sat in the peaceful desert evening listening to coyotes howl in the distance and laughed. Actually laughed. Sandra was so desperate she was inventing secrets that didn't exist. Harold and I had moved from California 30 years ago for his job promotion. Our finances had always been transparent. Her threats were as empty as her promises of caring for me had been. Barbara called that night with a full report. She's spiraling Ruth. Tried to hire a locksmith to change the locks, but Tom showed them the eviction notice. Attempted to cancel your utilities, but everything's in the trust now. She even called Pastor Williams claiming you'd joined a cult. How are the twins? That was my only real concern. Shaken, but okay. They're staying with Tom and Carol tonight. Apparently, Sandra spent the day rage cleaning and boxing up your things. Lisa's been checking on them. The next few days fell into a pattern. I'd wake to desert sunshine and peaceful silence. Sandra would wake to the consequences of her choices. Her job, already in jeopardy from Patricia's HR report, evaporated when she missed 3 days trying to break into my financial accounts. The friends she'd convinced I was declining abandoned her as the truth spread through social media, helped along by Tyler's livestream that had gone locally viral. Brad resurfaced on day 4, according to Barbara's intelligence network. He showed up at the house demanding his share of the non-existent windfall. The neighbors reported shouting matches that required police intervention. The twins stayed with various friends, too embarrassed to be home. On day 7, Sandra tried a new tactic. She called Barbara sobbing about being a terrible daughter, claiming mental breakdown, promising to get help. It might have worked if Barbara hadn't been a real estate broker who'd seen every manipulation in the book. She actually said she'd been off her medication, Barbara reported that evening. What medication? She's never been on anything according to you. Just another lie, I confirmed. Though maybe she should consider some after this. The legal machinery ground forward regardless of Sandra's theatrics. The eviction notice was served properly. The restraining order held firm after she violated it by having friends call me. Robert filed additional paperwork making it clear that any attempt to contest my estate would result in criminal fraud charges. Week 2 brought desperation. Sandra posted on Facebook about her confused elderly mother who'd been manipulated by greedy relatives. The post backfired spectacularly when Tyler commented. With the truth, Madison backed him up and dozens of my friends shared their own stories of my obvious mental clarity. She tried to access my medical records claiming power of attorney. Dr. Martinez's office not only refused, but reported the attempted violation to Adult Protective Services. The investigation Sandra had tried to weaponize against me turned toward her instead. By week 3, reality had fully set in. Brad abandoned ship, heading back to wherever he'd been hiding. Sandra's possessions accumulated in boxes on the lawn as she slowly accepted the inevitable. The twins officially moved in with their father's parents, who'd been horrified to learn about the fake divorce and fraud scheme. Tom sent me photos of Sandra loading a U-Haul looking haggard and defeated. She'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks, the weight of her cruelty finally pressing down on her shoulders. Part of me felt a maternal twinge, but then I'd remember her voice on that phone call. Mom can rot in whatever nursing home Medicaid will pay for. Gintritziao. On day 29, Barbara called with news that made everything worthwhile. The twins want to talk to you. They've written letters. I video called them from Arizona, my heart racing. Tyler appeared first, his young face serious. Grandma, I'm sorry, he began, voice cracking. I helped Mom spy on you. I thought I was helping, but I was just being a jerk. Dad's parents showed me what real family looks like, and it's not what Mom was doing. Madison joined him on screen. We love you, Grandma. When you come back, can we visit you? Not live with you. We know that's too much to ask, but just visit like normal grandkids. Of course, I said through tears. You'll always be welcome. This was never about you two. They told me about their new school, their therapy sessions, their determination to be better than what they'd seen. As we talked, I saw Harold in Tyler's serious eyes, myself in Madison's determined chin. These children might still become the people their mother had failed to be. On day 30, Sandra was gone. Barbara confirmed the house was empty except for a few items she'd tried to take that weren't hers. Harold's tools, my grandmother's china. Tom and Carol had intercepted those, returning them to their rightful places. She'd left no forwarding address, no goodbye note, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just absence, which was perhaps the greatest gift she could have given me. I booked my flight home for the next day. It was time to reclaim my life, my house, my peace. The war was over, and I'd won more than just property. I'd won my freedom, my dignity, and surprisingly, a relationship with my grandchildren that might actually be healthier than before. As I packed my suitcase in Arizona, I found myself humming Harold's favorite song. Somewhere, I hoped he was proud of how his Ruthie had fought. Tomorrow, I'd walk back into our house not as a victim, but as a victor. The execution was complete. Justice had been served, and life at 77 was just beginning again. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, truly my kitchen again, preparing Thanksgiving dinner. The November rain drummed against the windows, but inside warmth filled every corner. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if Sandra's darkness had been exorcised along with her presence. Grandma, is this right? Madison asked, carefully crimping the edges of an apple pie. She'd been coming every weekend since school started, eager to learn the recipes Sandra had never cared about. Perfect, sweetheart. Your great-grandmother would be proud. Tyler looked up from where he was setting the dining room table, the same table where Sandra had tried to steal everything from me. Should I put out 8 places or 9? 9, I confirmed. Robert's joining us. Both twins exchanged knowing looks. Robert Jennings had been more than my attorney through this ordeal. Somewhere between legal consultations and support during the worst days, we discovered a companionship neither of us had expected to find again. Harold would have liked him. They'd shared the same dry humor and protective nature. The doorbell rang and I heard Barbara's voice carrying from the entrance. I hope you made extra stuffing, Ruthie. I've been dreaming about it since Phoenix. My sister had extended her stay, indefinitely buying a condo downtown. Someone needs to keep an eye on you, she'd joked, but I knew the truth. We'd rediscovered our sisterhood through this crisis, and neither wanted to let it go again. As I pulled the turkey from the oven, I thought about Sandra. I'd received one communication from her, a letter through her court-appointed attorney 3 months ago. It was part of her plea deal, a mandated apology that read like it had been written by committee. I acknowledge my actions caused harm, she'd written in careful legalese. I take responsibility for attempting to defraud my mother and accept the consequences of my choices. No real remorse. No understanding of the pain she'd caused. Just words required to avoid jail time. She'd been sentenced to 5 years probation, 300 hours of community service, with the elderly and mandatory therapy. The twins said she was living somewhere in Washington working retail, telling people her family had abandoned her. But today wasn't about Sandra. It was about the family I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Dorothy arrived with her famous green bean casserole and a hug that said everything. Tom and Carol brought wine and stories from their recent cruise. Pastor Williams came early to help carve the turkey, a tradition he'd started to make sure I wasn't alone on holidays. And then there was Robert, dear Robert, who'd arrived with flowers and a nervous smile. At 78, he was learning to love again, too. We'd take it slow, both of us carrying ghosts, but there was something sweet about finding companionship when you'd thought that chapter had closed. As we gathered around the table, I stood to offer the blessing. Looking at each face, chosen family and blood family alike, I felt Harold's presence strongly. "Thank you for this gathering," I began. "For second chances and hard-won wisdom, for the strength to stand up for ourselves and the grace to forgive those who can't yet see their own faults, for grandchildren brave enough to choose truth over comfort, and for friends who become family when family fails us." "Amen," chorused around the table, followed by the beautiful chaos of passing dishes and overlapping conversations. After dinner, as the twins helped clear plates and the adults lingered over coffee, Tyler pulled me aside. "Grandma, I've been thinking about what happened, about how Mom tried to make you seem crazy when you were the sanest person in the house." "What about it?" I asked gently. "I want to study law," he said firmly. "Elder law, specifically. I want to help protect people like you from people like Mom was being." I hugged him tightly, this grandson who'd gone from documenting my supposed decline to defending my dignity. "Your grandfather would be so proud." The evening wound down slowly, nobody eager to leave the warmth of belonging. As Barbara helped me pack leftovers for everyone to take home, she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Any regrets, Ruthie?" I considered carefully wrapping turkey in aluminum foil. I regret that Sandra lost her way. I regret that the twins had to see their mother's worst self, but regret standing up for myself, never. "Good," Barbara said firmly. "You know what you should do. Tell your story. Really tell it. There are so many elderly people out there facing the same thing, too scared or ashamed to fight back." The idea had been percolating for weeks. Lisa, the social worker, had suggested something similar. Even Dr. Martinez mentioned how powerful my story could be for her other elderly patients dealing with family exploitation. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in front of a camera at the senior center, telling my story to a small gathering. The video, meant for internal education, somehow found its way to YouTube. Within a month, it had 100,000 views and comments from adult children horrified that parents could face such treatment, and elderly people grateful to know they weren't alone. My name is Ruth Morrison. I'd begun that first recording, and I survived elder abuse from someone I never expected, my own daughter. The response was overwhelming. Invitations to speak at conferences, requests from elder advocacy groups, even a literary agent interested in a book deal. But the most meaningful messages came from the elderly people who'd found courage in my story to set their own boundaries, seek help, or simply realize they weren't crazy. They were being gaslit. I started a YouTube channel with Robert's grandson's help. Ruth's Truth. We called it where I shared not just my story, but resources, legal information, and hope. Tyler often appeared as my co-host, a reformed accomplice now advocating for elder rights. The channel grew beyond my wildest dreams. 50,000 subscribers, then 100,000. Comments poured in from around the world. Stories of survival, gratitude for awareness, adult children recognizing toxic patterns in their own behavior and seeking help. One comment stood out, posted by username S. Morrison, 2019. "This is Sandra's daughter. My mom is sick and getting help. Thank you for protecting us when she couldn't. We love you." Madison later confirmed she'd written it with her mother's permission during a family therapy session. It wasn't reconciliation. That bridge was too damaged to rebuild. But it was acknowledgement, a tiny green shoot of possibility, that Sandra might someday face herself honestly. A year after that horrible ultimatum in my kitchen, I stood on a stage in Salem addressing the Oregon State Legislature about strengthening elder abuse laws. Robert sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Barbara was there too, having become an advocate in her own right. Even the twins came missing school with their other grandparents' permission to watch their grandmother change the world. Elder abuse often comes from those we trust most. I testified, my voice strong and clear. We must protect our seniors not just from stranger danger, but from family members who see them as ATMs rather than human beings deserving of dignity and respect. The bill passed unanimously. Oregon's new elder protection laws became a model for other states. I'd turned my pain into purpose, my betrayal into a beacon for others. But the greatest victory was smaller, quieter. It was Sunday dinners with the twins, teaching them Harold's secret barbecue sauce recipe. It was Tuesday lunch dates with Robert, holding hands like teenagers. It was my book club meetings, resumed my volunteer work at the library, appreciated my life fully, mine again. On what would have been Harold's 80th birthday, I visited his grave with fresh roses and good news. I did it, honey. I told the headstone, running my fingers over his carved name. I stood up to her. I protected what we built. And you know what? I'm not done living yet. I found love again, different from ours, but still good. I'm helping people, making a difference, being the woman you always knew I was, even when I forgot myself. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment I could swear I smelled his cologne, heard his laugh, felt his approval. That evening I updated my YouTube channel with a special message. To those facing elder abuse, you are not alone. You are not crazy. You deserve respect, dignity, and peace in your golden years. Don't let anyone, not even family, convince you otherwise. To adult children struggling with aging parents, seek help. Love doesn't mean taking control. Care doesn't mean theft. If you're feeling overwhelmed, there are resources available. Don't let desperation turn you into someone you'll regret becoming. And to my viewers who've shared this journey, thank you. You've helped an old woman turn the worst chapter of her life into purpose. That's the greatest gift of all. The video ended with my signature sign-off developed over months of practice. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power. This is Ruth Morrison, living proof that the best chapters can come after the worst betrayals. As I uploaded the video, a notification popped up. A comment on last week's video from a new username. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself. Getting help. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then with steady fingers, I typed a reply. Healing is possible. I'm rooting for you. Because that's what love does. It sets boundaries without building walls. It protects itself while leaving room for redemption. It knows that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequence they need to finally face themselves. The story could have ended with bitterness and broken family ties. Instead, it ended with purpose, unexpected love, and the knowledge that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. My name is Ruth Morrison. I'm 78 years old. I survived elder abuse, found love again, and discovered my voice could help others find theirs. And this is just the beginning. 8. To everyone listening to this story, have you or someone you know faced similar family exploitation? What gave you the strength to stand up for yourself? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity. Share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim their power and dignity. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, family should lift you up, not tear you down. You deserve respect at every age. Stay strong, set boundaries, and never let anyone convince you that your worth diminishes with time. Until next time, this is Ruth reminding you that the best chapters of your life might be waiting just beyond your biggest challenges. Keep fighting, keep believing, and keep living your truth.